My name is Lauren Nevitt. I am the Community Engagement and Training Director with Hawaii Children's Action Network. I also run a parent leadership training program through HCAN, and you can ask me more about that later if you like. But today we're here to talk about telling story and how we use that when advocating for the things we care about. And then at the end, I'm going to go through, we're going to spend the first portion of that talking about story, and really I'm going to talk not so much about how to tell your story, but why to tell your story. We had found we've been doing a lot of training about the how, and people still get very not really the importance of it. And so we're going to talk a little more about the why from a couple of different perspectives. We're going to then talk a little bit about the how in terms of constructing your story. I'm going to then give you guys a little time to practice doing that construction for yourself, and then in some small groups to share out with each other. And then we're going to spend the end of our time just kind of talking about using that to submit testimony and how you actually submit testimony to the state legislature, which this year is going to be completely virtual, is my understanding. So really knowing how to get into the website and where to submit your testimony and how is going to be vitally important this year. So that's what our afternoon is going to look like. And so I'm going to share my screen with a PowerPoint that we will go through. And and we'll just go ahead and get started. And please know if you have questions, please do put them in the chat box, and I will try to answer them, or if I see them as I go along, kind of try to keep an eye on it, but mostly I'll kind of answer them towards the end. So here we go. All right, so the power story. Telling your story is really what we know from advocating, and I've been doing this work for over 20 years, is the most powerful tool you have in trying to convince somebody to move in the direction you want them to move. Most of us, right, are advocating around an issue, a specific piece of legislation. Sometimes we're off doing campaign work, right, and we're trying to convince people to support a candidate. But in this context, right, we're talking about persuasion in terms of an issue or legislation. And really the most powerful tool you have is your own story and how it connects to the thing you're trying to move. And of course, now I'm going to have the same problem I had yesterday that I can't, right? Using story, when you tell your story in a good way, you're seen as a leader on that particular topic. And so that's a powerful thing. Storytelling gives us a sense of presence when we're doing something. And telling our story connects whatever we're trying to move, connects, in this case, the legislature to the issue. And that is vitally important because, people don't really connect to data, right? They connect to people. And so this is why it's important that we use that, right? So why do we tell stories, right? Stories, we have a history of storytelling, goes all the way back to cave drawings, right? That was storytelling. Gilgamesh is the oldest known story that in the history of man. And it's moved on through the centuries, right? Printing presses tell stories. Today it's TED Talks. Those are stories, right? Those are things we use to convey messages. And in Hawaii in particular, mo'olelo is, is storytelling. And and you can read the definition here. I really liked the second one, kind of spoke to me a little bit more, in that mo'olelo, we gain power with each telling and retelling of a story. It is no mistake that our kapuna called each version of our mo'olelo a mana. Stories bring mana to our lahui. Stories tell us about connecting to our culture and bring success, about how our keiki know the importance of community, about how bright the future is when it is built upon Nahano Hawaii, right? So stories have power. and we use them for many different reasons, right? There's also a sociology behind storytelling. We derive and transmit values, our values, through storytelling. We can think about it, right? Myths, religion, fables, even your family stories that we have in our own families transmit our values. And we are identified, morality is identified by stories, and we use our stories to define our own narrative. You let somebody else tell their story, that defines that narrative. So telling our story helps us define our own narrative about what the point we're trying to make. And this is why it's important. There is also a physical biological reasoning around the power of telling story. And you can see these two little graphics, right? One is the power of the green one, right, is your power, all of the different things that kind of fire off in your brain when storytelling happens, as opposed to what happens when your brain is just focused on data. You can see you have a lot more synapses firing over when your brain is on stories. There's another thing that happens physically in your brain when you tell stories and people listen to stories. We release oxytocin and dopamine happens in our brain. And those two things, when they're released, when storytelling is happening, is a couple of vital things happen. Your listener is more likely to listen. They're more likely to remember what you said, and they're more likely to be persuaded. So this is why it's important when you tell stories, because listening, remembering what you said, and being persuaded are the three most important things when you're trying to advocate for something. So if telling, and this is why, again, we kind of have physiological proof of why telling stories is the more effective tool than just presenting someone with a bunch of data points, right? This is why we do this. So we've gone through a little bit, right? A little bit of the why, and I could do an hour on each of those topics, but I'm going to kind of keep us, give a little time at the end so we can socialize. But there's also a narrative that you need to create when telling a story. And these are really important when thinking about telling your story. There's actually a kind of some fundamental ways that you want to make sure you tell this story that is also important. So number one, and the most important, is for every story is there has to be a hero to the story. And what's really important is that it be a person, be an individual, not an organization. And from an advocacy standpoint, most often than not, that person is you or someone you know. But it needs to be very clear that the center of that story should be a person, right? So it's, I'm telling this thing that happened to me that connects me to the thing that I'm trying to talk to my legislator about, right? The other thing we need to do in our story is a setting, right? What's the scene? What's the picture we're going to paint, which is the circumstances surrounding. So the story is me. This is the thing that happened to me. I'm going to describe that thing. That's your setting, right? I hope that makes sense. The next piece is the challenge, right? This is the world as it ought to be versus what it is. So you're setting up a challenge to the legislature, like you want them to change something. So you need to express what that thing is, what you would like the world to be, right? This is how we should see it. And then you're going to ask them to make a choice, and their choice is either make the change or don't make the change, right? So, and then at the end, it's the outcome. And kind of ties back a little bit to the challenge, but the outcome is the result. This is the outcome we want, and this is the thing. So does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to stop here for a moment and see if there are any questions about anything I've said so far. And you can put it in the chat because I can't actually see everybody's faces. The bad part of Zoom is when you're presenting, you then can't see. I can only see like 6 of you in my. So if you have a question, put it in the chat box and I will try to answer. Okay, great. I don't see any questions right now. or just unmute and holler at me, because otherwise I'll hear you, is another option. Okay, great. So now what I want you guys to do, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do this. We're going to take a little moment. I want you all to create your story. So pick a topic you're passionate about. It can be anything. Some of you, I know, I can already know what you're going to talk about. But just pick a thing. And I want you to write your narrative, right? I want you to think about, right? And with these 5 particular components. So you need to, who's your hero? What's the setting? What's the challenge? What's the choice? And what's the outcome? I'm gonna time this, and I'm gonna give you all 5 minutes to think about this. You can write it down or just mull it in your brain. And then we're gonna break into small groups. I'm gonna break you into small groups, and you're gonna share with each other what those stories are. Can I get a volunteer to share their story with me, what they told to the group?
Haley, do you want to share?
Yeah, I can.
All right. Go for it, Haley.
Okay. So yeah, I was just thinking about things that I can relate to, and that's why I want to change this thing. So I'm just talking about how I'm from Washington, from a small rural town, and that I was sick in high school. I had to go to the hospital for six weeks. And I just was reflecting on that experience and how not everybody has access to healthcare like that, and how lucky I am to have had that. So I know even being in Hawaii, that's a huge issue, like keeping practitioners here and on the neighbor islands. So that was my challenge, just access to healthcare, and then for low-income families in rural areas. And then just bringing that to the legislators to be able to try to incentivize sending practitioners to rural areas, and hopefully having that program so that we can create more equity in healthcare. That was my story.
Wonderful, 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 right? And obviously, if you were going to go have a conversation or a one-on-one or write testimony, you might flesh some of those pieces out a little more to create a real visual. I always tell people, right, when you're telling these stories, and one, I just want to commend you, that was perfect. Like, I usually have to kind of spend a little bit more time connecting the why someone is passionate about a thing to their personal story, but you nailed it right on the head. So that was awesome, right? You had this personal experience around being a sick child in a rural community. And there's lots of wonderful imagery you could create around that. But then the challenge right now is, if we were to say there's a healthcare bill in front of the legislature around specifically rural access or rural hospitals, right? Any of those kind of things could be. So, but you got it right down. That was so great. Awesome. I'm so excited. I'm like, okay, I don't get to go through my why exercise. I always call it the why game. Because normally the pieces people miss are the hero piece, the me, the I. They tend to like want to create an other story of this thing that's kind of happening out in the world. And, you know, they're concerned about an issue, and they talk about, again, data points, or they kind of go down a rabbit hole of, you know, that, or just the issue itself, and don't forget to connect it to them. Like, what, you know, so I end up playing a lot of what I call the why game, which is, why is this important to you? Why did you get to, like, what happened to you personally that kind of, because somewhere in our lives we get connected. For me, I started out doing campaign work, and people used to ask me forever why I did it. And mine was the same thing. I grew up in an abusive household, and had really, that experience had led me to want to help children, not ever have to experience that again. And originally I thought I would become a lawyer and go fight for children in the court, until I realized that laws aren't made in the court, they're made at the legislature. So we need to write. So it's that, but that, right? It's that personal experience I had of something to me that connected me to that specific thing. And the other reason I wanted to talk a little bit more about the why we tell the story, because we also found in a lot of these conversations or trainings that when we told people to tell their story, it also felt very overwhelming. Like they felt like they had to tell their entire life story. And that can be a little like, oh God. So it really is getting a little bit more to that piece of just the story around why you're passionate or why you're trying to change this thing, right? So, and there's usually something that's happened to us, an experience that has brought us there. And so it's really trying to paint that picture. Because when we go in to talk to legislators, right, being able to paint a very vivid picture, they'll remember it, right, as they then go make those decisions. And so this is again back to the biological reason, right? The synapses happening in their brain, they listen, they remember, and they're more persuaded through a story than just giving them facts. So so that's awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah,
I want to say, I told my group, the one, 4 of them, that, hello, I'm Flora. I'm from Hawaii, Hawaii. I go to the clubhouse, and we having an advocacy meeting, like Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We talk about legislature and health tax cuts and some other and blind vendors too. And then we have like senator and representative come to the meeting, talk about topic, certain topic. And then that's why we had like 10 or 12 members and like 10 staff go to the media advocacy, and forget the other ones, but get some of them came today, like Linda, Kelly, Kelly and Christy Bersin. Yeah.
Okay, but well, thank you for sharing that. But I'm not that's more an event you had going on, not really telling your story about a thing you're passionate about. But that is really helpful.
I'm sorry. This is my first time.
Quite all right. So good information to know. And I do know that the clubhouses often have a lot of these great meetings, and it's a place to then share the story with your legislature, right? One place that we can talk about, right? Part of our advocacy is reaching out to our state legislators and sharing our stories with them. Clubhouse meetings are a great place. A lot of other organizations do that. I highly encourage that you reach out to your own personal legislature, find out who they are, schedule a one-on-one just to get to know them. Part of advocacy work is building relationships and them getting to know you. And so that one-on-one, like, it's gonna be interesting this year because we don't, they're doing most of session virtually. There will be no in-person stuff. So you can't really do the in-person one-on-one, but maybe you could schedule a Zoom with them to just, start that relationship before you make the ask of, I want you to vote yay or nay on a piece of legislation, right? So this is
we're having January next month. We're having a legislature opening, but I think it's gonna be on Zoom too. Like every year, January. Yeah. Legislature opening.
Well, great. Pass that along to Chris. Well, Christy could let us know because she's part of our group, and we can certainly share with everybody when those are happening, because those are great. Those are great. A lot of organizations do them, have opening day kind of activities. Like I said, it's going to be a little weird this year because normally we would just all be at the state capitol and wandering around and celebrating and going to every legislator's office and eating food and doing whatever, but that's not going to happen this year. So we're going to do whatever. So the next step is, right, you've got your story, if there were a specific bill you were trying to advocate on, and if you've gone through our series of trainings, right, we started out with kind of how to build your campaign or create the bill, right? That was session 1. Session 2, Christy, who is here with Focus, also did how you build your coalitions of people who are going to help you pass this legislation. And then our session last week was how to talk about that. Primarily Ryan, who is here as well, talked about using social media, the messaging part of it. How are you gonna get the word out to everybody? And so once you have all that, right, we're now session starts. You've got a bill, and you need to go, start lobbying your state legislators. And like I said, this year in particular, because we're not in session, we're not in in-person session, it'll be all online. It's going to be really important that you know how to use the state legislative website and where to submit your testimony. And so I'm going to kind of walk through that a little bit. We're going to kind of do this in 2 steps just because I'm gonna switch between actually going to the website and then back to my PowerPoint, because one piece of the website is not actually live right now, so I can't show you. But let me show you what the website, right? So we have a really great, Hawaii actually has a really lovely, and that didn't go where I wanted it to go. Hold on a minute. Can you see that Hawaii State Legislator website? Okay, so right, this is the website, and it's Hawaii, I got this bar, capital.hawaii.gov. And you're gonna wanna go to this website and create yourself an account, which is really easy. It's 2 steps. You're gonna go here to where it says to register. I'm already registered, so I'm not sure it'll let me do it again, but right, you'll click on register, you'll get this form to fill it out. You'll get an email verification, and you just need to click on it and you're done. You've got an account, you're ready to go. Once you have your account, you're then gonna sign in. And this is what the website looks like, right? All you need to know on the Hawaii State Legislature. The recent updates are kind of the most current things happening at the website. So they would normally during session have hearing notices here, or any really important vital, like, of course, right now, right? The state capitol building remains closed. If there were, other really important things, they would be kind of here. So you would want to just kind of check in to see, whatever. But primarily, the thing we're gonna look at is you want to submit testimony. And there are 2 ways to do it. The easiest is just to go submit testimony. And this is why I'm gonna tell you, I can't really, it would actually look a little different. But for now, if you want to go kind of just as you're poking around, and I really recommend that you go here, get yourself set up, and just click on all the buttons to see where they go. But right now, what's also nice is right here, they will also give you some written instructions that you can use, and they're really helpful. But the other thing you can do, so you would submit testimony, and I'll show you in a moment what that looks like when you hit that button. I have some screenshots. But the other way that you can submit testimony is you're gonna write your bill number in here. And again, because there are no bill numbers, I can't really put any, I don't think anything will work if I, no. So because there aren't any bills in process right now, there's nothing here. But you would stick your bill number, write it in here. It would what would pop up would be a screen of like all the bill statuses, like what's going on with the bill language, kind of if it's in committee, whatever. On that page, there's also a submit testimony button. Again, just kind of added, but really, once you know your bill, the easiest thing is just to hit this submit testimony button. All right, once we've done that, I'm gonna go back over to my other PowerPoint and I'll show you what it looks like when it pops up. No, that's not it. Hold on a minute.
So anybody can sign up for that?
Yep. Yeah, anybody can go create an account on the legislative website. All you need is a name and an email address, and that is it. So, but once you're in and you've hit the orange little submit testimony button, you're gonna get a screen that looks like this. Oops, didn't mean to move that. Hold on. Right, which will have your bill number here up in the corner. It'll ask you these are the 3 main basic things, whether you support it, you don't support it, or you're just submitting comments, which is, a very commonly used tactics. We've often had bills where we're kind of in the middle of, there's some pieces we like about it and some pieces we don't like about it. And so we'll just submit comments to say exactly things like, we like this piece, but we don't like this piece. And so for now, we're just not going to take a stance. You're going to say whether or not you're going to be testifying in person. Again, this session, that's not happening, but I'm not, because I haven't seen if they've changed this page for next year. I don't even know if that'll be an option. The next is you can attach your testimony. So you can pre-write the testimony, and I'm going to go over a format, like what they like to see here in a second. You can pre-write it out so you have it all nice and done, and you can just attach the file and hit submit, or you can submit it as text in here. So they make it really easy, kind of whatever easiest for you to use, because everybody, you know, we all learn and do things differently. So it's kind of nice. Once you've submitted, what's nice is this screen over here will then kind of come up, and it just lets you know, like, right, the bills you're supporting or opposing, or if you submitted comments, it's all nicely color coded. It just lets you know that it has been gone where it needs to go, that it has been submitted, and so you're good to go. But you can always come back to this page and just kind of keep track of, you know, what you've done and what you haven't done. The other thing I'm going to point out is up here, you'll notice that when this bill number was put in, it actually let them know when the bill hearing was. So, or is going to be, because you always need to submit your testimony ahead of time. They generally will say in bill notices that it should be 24 to 48 hours. Again, we'll have to see if that holds for this session, given that they're doing it all online. But even then, we have found that, you know, we have submitted testimony up to like 10 minutes before. So that is, you know, but if you really want to make sure it's there, and everybody, you know, has gotten it, just make sure to get it in early. It's always just a better, you know, sometimes, like I said, just because of work and different things happen, you know, you get it and when you get it. So, but that's a way for you to, it's really nice to kind of keep all track. So that's how you're going to submit everything online this year. Now there's one other piece that you, and I apologize for having to go back and forth between PowerPoints, but I wanted to share one other piece on the LEG website, because there's one other place that you'll notice if you go into where these instructions are, it says if you're having difficulty submitting testimony through our online system, you can email the committees, and there's actually then a list of all the committee hearings with their email addresses. Now, what's interesting about that, I'm sharing it because they put this on their website. And so I tend to like to submit online and do whatever, and sometimes just even directly email all of the legislators on that committee, just because I want to make sure everybody has seen the testimony before they get there. But what we have found is, don't rely on this solely. There were a lot of committees that actually don't take testimony this way. And so it really is, when you read a hearing notice, it'll tell you exactly how they want to, again, I say that with a caveat of maybe they'll be better this year because everything is going to be online and there is no in-person. So just wanted to let you know that was there. And this is always just a good email list to have in general, because it'll go to the committee person, and you know, they'll get it one way or another. Oftentimes what happens if you email, they will eventually get it, and it'll sometimes show up as late hearing and will end up on the record. But so that's why really I would say the safest bet to make sure anything you want to get in is create an account, send your testimony in through that online system. And so that is where you're at. Now, the last piece I want to share, whew, boy, an hour goes by quick. So many things I feel like we need to tell you and not enough time. The last thing I want to share with you is they do have a recommended format of how to write your testimony, right? So this is, you know, the chair of the committee, the name of the committee. We usually write, when I've written testimony for HCAM, we do both the chair and the vice chair. Whatever the bill or resolution number is that you're putting testimony in for, the date and time of the hearing, and the time and place of the hearing. All of those things will be on the hearing notice. And you can find those if you know a bill number, just go look right where I showed you where to put in the bill number. All of that information is there. You're gonna write your introduction for your bill, which is basically, when we've done it for HCAM, let me go through this and I'll pull up a sample piece of testimony that we wrote for HCAN, right? Your content then, this is where your story goes in, right? This is your reason you're taking this position, why they should support it, your story, all of that kind of goes in there. And then a closing, which is just thank you for your time and please support this bill. And then always make sure you sign it. If you're doing it on a group's behalf, make sure you're recognizing what group. If you're just doing it as an individual, I always highly recommend you at least put your city and or if you know your House district, Senate district, because legislators are more likely to also listen to you if you're their direct constituent. So always another good reason to know who your legislators are. So that is that. And we'll share all this so you guys have this information, you can go back to it. And then one last piece, let me pull up the sample piece of legislation testimony we wrote just so you can see it. And then I will take questions because we're already at 3:52 and I'm feeling like so many things. Okay, hold on. Right, so here's a piece of legislation. I did this back in 2019. And right, so this is the date. Here's the chair and vice chair of that committee, what committee it was going to, here's who it was from, the bill number, bill hearing and location. This was our kind of opening, our story, and then the closing, right? So this is, you know, what it kind of looks like. All right. Alrighty then. I have so many things in my brain now. I feel like I want to tell you, and I'm like, I can't do it in 7 minutes. So I want to just stop and see if anybody has any questions that I can try to answer for you. No questions. Oh my goodness. Now, see, you already know what you're doing. All right. Deanna, yes, you can have a copy of that testimony. We'll make sure to send it along. Like I said, we're recording all of this. And then I can also make sure if you want the PowerPoint and the sample testimony, we can make sure you get that as well. All right, anything else I can answer for people? This workshop till 4 or 4:30. The last half hour was supposed to be a bit of a social hour, a social half hour. So the workshop itself was only an hour, and then we were just going to take time at the end. If people wanted to chat, we can break out into some small groups, and we can do 2 rounds of breakout rooms, a little bit larger, just so people can introduce themselves and maybe have a little bit more time. So John says, I want to suggest a budget shortfall correction strategy, how to go about it. Okay, John. Is John still here? John's iPad. Would approaching the finance committee, I'm not sure the question. John, do you not have audio? Is that why you're just?
There we go.
Okay.
I was like, I'm not trying to give me the chat, and I was trying to put it all
there. So tell me your question. What is your?
Well, I just got something from a couple different legislators that said that they were worried about budget shortfalls of $1 billion, and we're kind of a top-down state in terms of how they run management. And I thought if we did a bottom-up strategy, which is opposite of what they usually do, but would give them the opportunity to get feedback from the people on the bottom end. And
you were right on, and right in line with a bunch of different groups who are actually working on this very idea. So the Working Families Coalition, the Tax Fairness Coalition, Common Good Coalition have been having lots of conversations, one about the specific thing, and trying to combine, because taxes get hard, because this is one of those things where like data points become, you know, super important, but it's also mind numbing to just read spreadsheets all day long. So it's trying to like, how does the tax budget shortfall going to impact people's lives? And then how do we correct, right? How do we correct that? And so there's lots of good conversations going on right now around, one, creating progressive tax revenue solutions to a budget shortfall. But you're right, we have a very top-down state, and so it's a challenge to try to get them to move. But that just becomes then movement work and organizing work, that it's the more voices we can get talking to them, and the more people that they hear from, instead of the same organizations that they hear from every year, it's really becoming the work of trying to get more individual constituents to start, you know, hollering at them, because they'll just kind of keep doing what they're doing unless they feel like there's some pressure from the community happening. So, well,
and that's the thing is that the legislators are trying to do it, and then they're not the directors, and then the directors are not the managers, and the managers aren't the front end staff. And it's like, I bet you there's just a rich the guys are just like, hey, you don't need to cut our times off. We never use this, or we never do this over here. Why don't we just like do that? Or what if we take an afternoon off or something? You know, I'm sure they just have a huge amount of ideas and things, but because they don't have the support of us in the community to give them voice, they never get heard because of the top-down style, which is pretty effective. There's a lot of good things about it, but at the same time, you know, in this situation, we're not getting to hear their input. Yeah. And I was thinking, God, you know, would I submit a bill? Would I hook up with these different organizations you're talking about and just plant some more seeds and talk to my legislators, talk to the Committee on Finance about it? I don't know.
All of the above, quite frankly. Right. Sadly, this is the more people we can get from every direction. The nice thing about the Tax Fairness Coalition and Working Families Coalition, and we're just following Tax Fairness Coalition's lead, is that you know, we used to just kind of bitch and moan about the legislator, but it's also providing them with like the alternative solutions. You guys kind of got it stuck in your head that you can only do it this one way. And Tax Fairness Coalition has come up with a pretty lengthy list of different ways to create revenue. And so you don't have to like all of them, but here is, you know, pick and choose. There's a lot of things we could be doing that would help us where we wouldn't end up in a shortfall. And so I think it really is, it becomes a little bit the monotony of repetitive, many voices. And like I said, I think even more importantly, it's individuals from the community and not, you know, coalitions or organizations, because they hear from us all the time. So it's just, you know, amplifying that volume. And we can certainly send along those organizations links and stuff if you guys want more information. So, but you're right where a lot of us are, John. So welcome to the team. All right, Chris had a question. How many times does it take to get your legislation passed? Does something new ever pass the first time? Good question, Chris. And I'm probably not the person to ask, as I have only been doing session work here in Hawaii for about 2 years. So, but even in my couple of short years, it is, I would certainly not say that, and from my conversations with people who've been around a lot longer than I do, it's, you know, the sad reality of it is, I would say no on legislation that's about actually helping individuals. If you wanted to pass a business tax or a corporation tax or something that helps development, then yes, right? And this is our challenge. Like, we have trying to shift that mindset that who needs help, and getting it out in a timely manner is vitally important. So this is just, but I don't know if there are any other longer term lobbyist session people on this call that could answer that, because that's just, I'm going to say that's more of a, it looks at in my short experience is what would be my understanding. So
I've seen people get things passed, ordinances, like around beach access and things for individuals or for one individual, and then to close the access down to the whole public, and then that individual move away, and then the ordinance pass. But I don't know. I mean, that's just one case I heard about in Russian River in Northern California. But I guess it just depends how determined you are.
Right.
What were the name of those organizations that you mentioned? The Coalition for Taxation?
So there's the Tax Fairness Coalition.
Tax
Fairness Coalition. And I'm going to Tax Fairness Coalition. I'm putting it in the chat as I say it. So
okay.
There's the Working Families Coalition. And the common good, Ashley, mostly because I see Ashley's face right now, it's common good coalition.
You mean, is that Common Cause or Common Good?
No, Common Good. Common Cause is that's a nonprofit.
And it's called just the Common Good.
And Laura, these are local organizations?
Yep, they're all Hawaii specific organizations. The only, all of them Common Good doesn't actually have its own website. They do have a Facebook page. Working Families and Tax Fairness, I think, have websites and all have social media presence, so you can find them that way as well. So, but right now, and there are probably more. These are only the three off the top of my head that I know are specifically having conversations around this tax budget shortfall, progressive revenue creation kind of thing. So, and always looking for, voices of community members. So it's not just, a lot of those coalitions end up being just a lot of different nonprofits that are working on these issues. And so we're always looking for singular kind of community voices from people to, to help us along.
And these singular voices, they do matter.
They do. Alex, I think it matters more that we could get 50 different individual people that make a call or submit testimony than it is to have just the Working Families Coalition submit testimony, right? Just way more important. And so even in my other hat, my daytime hat of Hawaii Children's Action Network, we'll submit testimony because we have a lobbyist. We spend a lot of time, same thing, trying to find community members to, because we do a lot of work around early education and childcare and paid family leave and paid, right? But it's really, right, because the individual is really where that story comes from. It's you being able to say, this is what's happening in my life, and I need you all to help. And it's kind of we also remember that's their job. Their job is supposed to be to help the community. And so a lot of tactic we've taken now is, we used to say, here's all of our thoughts of how you could fix it. We've really now kind of shifted a little bit to a space of, we just want you to call and ask them what they're going to do. Because what's your plan? What's your solution to this problem? That is your job. We pay you to solve these problems. Why aren't you solving them, right? So a little bit, kind of a combination of those two things. So all right. Let's see. So Flora had a question about, does the legislature know about the state furlough?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because I was going to call, I heard about the state furlough, even DOE, because my son goes to school, and I was so sad. I posted on Facebook that I sad because of the furlough, state furlough. The most is DOE school. Had further because of the teachers get low pay, and then the government do the furlough next month. It's unfair, and I want to call the government, IGE, or legislature, tell them what they think of the furlough of DOE.
Yeah, I mean, the furloughs are right. That's a whole other, again, we could do a whole session on state government furlough, right? Because it's the governor, it was the governor's call to do state employee furloughs. Everybody's aware of it. I mean, this is another one, like certainly call the governor and let him know that you're not no. And two, for your legislators, it's also like, again, what are you guys going to do about this? You can't, like,
Yes.
there's a lot of employees who are losing their pay, who, that money goes directly back into the economy. We could actually, provide, the Tax Fairness Coalition talks about this a lot, because there's actually, you do the furloughing, it actually in the long run hurts us even more, because it's the loss generation of revenue in terms of those employees now don't have money to spend, right? So it's kind of not actually a good strategy if you're worried about budget shortfalls. It actually makes it worse out the other end.
So that's why we need to get parents to
Correct.
Stand up.
Yeah, I'm part of the parents. You see, my boy is sophomore, and he's gonna be junior next year. So I'm sad. I'm very sad. It's unfair. It's not. The teacher struggling, work so hard, and it's like I don't even believe that teacher worked hard, and then very struggling, and it's like the teacher don't have enough pay more than the doctors. Yeah. You see, and then tax cut or something like that. Even the state, like the clubhouse. Yep. Like a furlough too, and it's like it's not fair, and it's like it's happened like before, like I think Lingo did that too, so many years.
Yeah.
Well, you got to talk about other things though. I think that's their fall too, backup plan, and with teachers, like I used to be a teacher, but I wouldn't be a teacher now because the pay is a third less or half of other places, like you said, or even 4 times less. Like if you went to Europe or other countries, they value teachers as much as doctors, and the pay for teachers is quite a bit higher. And then, like you said, they furlough them, and their workload is already extreme. They're taking work home that they, their day doesn't stop when the school is over. So, I think it's a matter of taking a bunch of different points and presenting them, because they could be exasperating the problem, because then that teacher comes back to all this extra work that hasn't been done, right? And they have a big responsibility to all the students. So it doesn't really help the teacher to be away like that.
Well, and any state employee, and the reality of it is, like, most of them, think about, government employees are service industry, right? These are people that are serving their community. That work doesn't stop just because you think we're going to give you a day off. Right. It doesn't. Teachers the same way. I have sisters that are teachers, like, they don't ever stop. Like, hey, so it really not paying me even less to do the same workload.
Most teachers see themselves as public service. Yeah. Public servant.
So
I know the teachers at our school, their concern really, to be perfectly honest, is less about themselves and more about their students that are not getting the services.
Right. Yeah.
And the connections, that they deserve.
Well, I feel bad. I'm like a teacher counselor, you guys. Oh my gosh, I feel bad. There's a lot of problems in the system that, aside from the problems that we're experiencing now, there are a lot of support services that aren't offered to the students, and the teaching to only 25% of the students, the memorizational ones. And a lot of Hawaiian and local kids don't go to that stuff. They're more active learners. They need something engaging. And
that's why I participate on the parent leadership, Laura, is because the parents need to feel empowered, and they need to see themselves as leaders. They do really need to step up, and that's why I became a part of that, and I'm glad I did.
Well, great segue, Pohai. Thank you very much. So what she's talking about, is, I mentioned earlier, the Hawaii Children's Action Network runs a program called Parent Leadership Training Institute. It's a 20-week program for leadership and advocacy. into week 6 now, so we've already kind of started for this year, but we run it every year. We did it virtually online this year, so it was very exciting that we actually ended up being able to, again, we had people from every island, but normally it would be very site specific because we would do it in person. But it's a great program about teaching parents how to be leaders, and it was a program created out of Connecticut by an educator like 20 some odd years ago now. Really the same idea. She was trying to figure out how parents are the best advocates for children and their families, right? So how do we, and what she heard over and over and over again was, I'm just a parent, what can I do, right? And that just sent her down this path. She created this program, and we brought it to Hawaii about 5 years ago. So we're in kind of our fifth cohort-ish this year. And had originally just been in Oahu. We expanded to Maui last year. We had expanded over to Big Island this year until COVID, and then we just did them all online. But hopefully next year we'll be back to being able to do it in person. But to Poai's point, this is exactly right. Like our parents, and when I say parents, I mean that in a very broad sense. Really, it's caregivers of children. So it could be the auntie, the uncle, grandma, right? We live in a state where, you know, multi-generational household. So it really is anybody who's helping raise children, community leaders. We have a person this year who, you know, she doesn't have kids of her own, but she actually works with families and children. So she was like, how can I, help my parents? Like she was saying, much like Poai, like, how can I spread the word out to like help other people do this? So,
and my position at school is parent community network coordinator. So I've been trying to, and this is one of the hardest gigs I've ever had in DOE is Kealakekee Elementary, but bridging, the school with the community has been really a challenge, and encouraging parents to stand up. But I wanted to share with you, Laura, that recently through a community project that I spearheaded, I was able to bring 2 parents, first grade parents, which matter, the K1, especially K1-2, onto our school community council.
Oh, nice.
And so I wanted to share that with you real quick because I might forget when we see each other on Tuesday.
Fantastic. I'm putting the link to the program just so if anybody wants to take a look at it. You can always reach out to me. I'm going to put my email address down here as well, so that if anybody has any other questions, feel free to email me anytime. I'm around.
As a parenting coach, I just want to endorse your program because that's really crucial. And then as a teacher and counselor, I just saw things that I had no power to control or, input. And I was like, well, what do I do? Do I go report to the committee? Had I known, like if the parents had a strong presence, and I could have gone to the parents and just said, hey, all these kids aren't getting services because these few teachers decided they just don't feel like doing it. And I'm just like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be there helping the kids, and sometimes the politics or just people, I don't know, being, I hate to say lazy, just, I don't know. I think they just, some people call it feudal kingdoms or whatnot. There's a lot of really good people in DOE that really are amazing.
Yeah. But people have to care too. People have to care.
Yeah.
Period. They have to care.
Well, I think the struggle from the parent side of it, like I said, when this program was created, and even I've been doing the program now for 2 years, and the thing, I often forget myself because I come out of community organizing. Like I said, I've been doing it for 20 some odd years, and I come mostly out of that doing it in Minnesota, which is just also a state that just civic engagement is just built into its, sense of being. And so I always forget when I go work, because I've worked in Louisiana and Washington State and now here, that like, I forget that like that for most people is not actually their mindset. And it's really, they just don't know what to do. Like nobody, like they don't know, like who, like they're frustrated. They're not sure how the system works or where to solve that problem, or that they're allowed to say anything.
Yeah. But you're also talking about a very, very diverse community.
Yeah.
Very diverse.
Very diverse.
This Hawaii that at 65, this Hawaii that I'm in now is not the same Hawaiʻi I grew up in, you know, Pearl City on Oahu.
Right.
Kapahulu right outside of Waikiki. Big difference. Yeah. It's just incredibly diverse. Our high school, 82 different cultures. 82. You know? So, I mean, like, and I can go on and on and on because California is no different. But it's just so diverse, you know? And then you put into the mix that we're diverse, period, as humanity. Right. You know, so trying to bridge that is a lot of work. And then you have transients. They come, they go, they come, they go, they come, they go, you know. So it's a moving target all the time.
But and I think teachers, if you had the power to if your parents advisory committee had the power to look at situations and say, no, we're not going to remove these services for the kids just because a principal or a few teachers decide they don't want to give these services to the kids anymore. You know, would be revolutionary. That in itself would be a big intervention. But the parents
that's a good point.
And just say, wait a minute, okay, it's like, you know, if the military's in the military, they have to put up the flag, right? You know, if you're in the school, you know, the parents should be able to say, hey, no, you can't drop these services. You can't, you know. Right. And I just don't know. I guess there's a lot of movement around the country around accountability right now, and saying, well, how can we have the police departments govern themselves, right? They don't have people outside of them holding them accountable. And the same thing goes with the DOE. It's like, well, what about having people outside of the DOE say, well, wait a minute, you know, just because this person's disabled or that person is from a different culture, they don't get to have services. It's not a...
You know what's really fascinating about DOE in Hawaii, that it's not like any other state, is because of the way they've structured it, right? There's only a singular school district for the entire state. Whereas in a lot of other states, you would have by county or you have which would then somewhat, also the thing they don't anymore, was electing your school board members. So instead of appointments, right, which sometimes helps, not always, but sometimes at least there's some accountability. But you're right, Don, a lot. I mean, as with most governmental entities, there's some accountability factor somewhere makes a huge difference. But part of that accountability is the public making noise about it.
Right.
So, but they just, so we have to teach them how.
Exactly.
And give them the power and the authority to do it, that it's okay to do it.
And we also need to be, without blinders on, we also need to remember to revisit some of these, laws, legislations, whatever, rules, whatever you want to call them. But we have to take that courage sometimes to say, let's revisit this because, it's 2020.
Right. And this is where, like, I love PLTI, especially, we're not there yet, but when we get more into the systems of how it works, because it's also knowing where that rule needs to be changed. Because sometimes it's not a piece of legislation, it's an admin rule change, right? Or it's, maybe it's a different thing. So this is where the whole educating about the whole process becomes really important. Is
exactly. I want to say, Laura, this has been really helpful, just talking story amongst all of us, as opposed to going into the breakouts. Not that the breakouts aren't a good thing, they are, but I'm just saying, just listening to you folks, even if it's an eavesdrop, just to listen to what you folks are saying. It's awesome. It's helpful.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad that people find it useful. This is why we do it. And we hope it's helping. Like our goal is, personally, I'm a big believer that the more people are civically engaged and educated, the better we are as a community, because, when we get to hear from everybody, we have a better sense of what we want as a community. And that's not necessarily means we all agree, but at least we've heard all the voices and can make more informed decisions about what we should be doing.
That's why, Laura, that's my voice about the school, because you heard my son go to James Campbell High School. You heard about the school, right? Yeah, 300,000 students. It's not enough buildings, and they have to expand the classroom and the AC. And then plus, I don't know how to do parenting school system, like online. My son's online, and plus, I don't know how to go to like yearbook I want to buy your book, but it's like, it's hard to buy, it's hard to talk to them for my voice about, because of pandemic too, something like that. And then plus, I want to ask the legislature about should make another school, because it's too much student in the school, James Campbell High School, and plus it's virus. Now they have the COVID. This happened the latter 3 times.
Well, and this is like, right. So Flora, you just brought up a good point. This is one of those things, like building a new school. Is that a legislative question or is it a DOE question? Because
DOE question.
Right?
Yeah.
So then that
DOE,
becomes, so that's not, so then it's not you wouldn't ask the legislature, right?
Well,
but,
I want to ask legislature about that too.
Right. But it's not their purview, so it's not a question to ask them. That's the point I'm getting at. Right. So it's I have one quick thing. Amanda said something about that should address access, but I'm not sure what you were, if she's still here.
It might not even be a part of the dialogue for DOE. I mean, if they don't include the parents.
Yeah, well, you know, they set up a whole new department last year under DOE that was around facilities. And so that would be probably the place about, but I don't know who ultimately makes the decision about increasing the number of schools. So that would be an interesting, it may end up very well be a legislative thing. I just don't know, but I'm assuming more it's a DOE decision. So then you would need to do work around there instead of, you know, because if you go to the legislature or bothering them with things that's not their purview or decision to make, it's just kind of wasting your time and their time, right? And then nothing happens, and that can be frustrating. And so that's where it's really important to know who's making the decision that you want changed, because then that's who you need to go, right? So like the furlough issue, that was a Governor Ige decision. It's not really the state legislature's decision to make. Like they didn't make it. How they impact it now, or is there anything to do about it? But it was right. But this was a great, like, creating a new physical building or adding an additional school building. Who makes that decision, right? And then so that's then who you want to go, you know, scream and holler at.
Well, today DOE wants very much to partner because they have to. Yeah. Funding is so low.
Yeah.
They have to partner with private and industry and so forth.
Well, so they created a whole new department last year, that the facilities department under the DOE, that I think is who now does this. And, you know, but I haven't seen the specifics of it. So
Laura, can I ask the question that I think it was, oh my God, Amanda that asked it. So her question was, do you know how they will take testimony at committee hearings?
Oh, I missed that. Thank you. No, thank you, Ash. So this was what we've heard, Amanda, is that everything will be online this year. So, and we have not heard, and maybe Sandy might know, because I'm going to put her on the spot. If they're doing, where they ended up with doing remote testimony, kind of, you know, like, are they going to do Zoom things and take testimony that way? I haven't heard. Sandy, do you happen to know? Are you still here, Sandy Ma? She might have left us.
I think Sandy left, but Rep Nakamura said it's going to be all Zoom.
All Zoom, but will they be taking testimony via Zoom? Because then there's no, this is the question, because they would then have to, somebody has to, you know, type it up. I don't know.
One of her clerks, or I think it was her office manager, I'm sorry, he said that they think, they haven't confirmed everything yet, but they're supposedly going to put everybody into a waiting room that's going to be doing the testimony. Okay. But that's all he said that he's not even sure.
we had heard this as they were looking at this. We just hadn't heard the, like, where they ended on it yet, because they were, you know, it's all new to them. Like, they're, you know, don't do technology very well, the legislators themselves. While they have a great website, the rest of the state legislator technology wise kind of stinks. I'm excited about it because we've been pushing forever remote testimony, because our neighbor island folks, like, never used to have an ability to come testify unless they were willing to spend the money and fly over and go through all that rigmarole. So maybe if they're, you know, because of this, it'll force them to now actually do it. And then once they do it, there won't be going back to any, like, this will be a thing. So, but I hadn't heard, I know that they were sorting it out. I just didn't know where they landed in terms of what they were actually going to do. So, all right. any other questions? Because we're at 4. We chatted now for a good time. That was fantastic, but we're getting to the end of our time. So I just wanted to see if there were any other, I wanted to point out that Paul put in the chat box that Community Children's Councils, CCCs, if you aren't familiar with them, are also another great resource if you're having issues at DOE or in your children's schools. So that's, be aware of those if you aren't familiar with them, because they're really great. All right, anything else? Awesome. All right, I'm gonna let you then go a few minutes early. Happy holidays to everyone, whatever holiday you celebrate, because I know we all have different things we celebrate. And I am gonna go enjoy the rest of my Sunday evening.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all for being here. We so graciously appreciate it. Know that we're recording this, and we'll send out a link to where all the recordings are. We've got one more in the series, which will happen after the new year, and it'll be a panel with some of our elected officials to specifically talk about the process. We won't be going into issues or anything. It really is like, how is the process? What is session 2021 gonna look like in the era of COVID-19? So Amanda, some of your questions will probably get a little bit more. Hopefully we'll know before then.
You know what I'm surprised about, Laura? I'm surprised they don't have like a practice site for your legislature where you can actually, you know, like a model, you know, kind of thing, yeah. Just practice.
I was really surprised when I had to prep this PowerPoint a couple weeks ago because I did a training with some students, and I went to go thinking I was going to screenshot, right, to be able to, like, you know, sign in, here's how you submit a bill, and like I said, that submit testimony page isn't even live until they actually have bills. So it's just like, how the heck am I, like, if you can't even go poke around in this before you get to session or know what to do, it was really hard. One last thing I'm going to point out, though, if you do have questions, legislative questions, the PAR room, the public access room at the state legislature, fantastic. And they can answer any technical questions you have about bills or anything else. Also, I would say LRB, the Legislative Records Bureau, is another great resource. And both of these do have kind of, instructions, but again, most of it's written. So, but there's that. But we'll send that out around with everything. It's good. I keep thinking of things as I'm talking to you, so this is fantastic. All right, that really is it. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a great evening and happy holidays.